My world smelled of sandalwood and coffee, a comforting scent of home. Then, a single text message revealed my entire life was a perfectly orchestrated lie, and I was just a placeholder in his future. The air in our apartment always smelled like him, a mix of sandalwood, old books, and the faint, clean scent of the coffee he was perpetually brewing. That evening, it was particularly strong, a comforting blanket as we sat on the floor of our living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our future. Glossy brochures for suburban houses were fanned out across the worn wooden floorboards, their perfect lawns and gleaming kitchens a stark contrast to our cozy, cramped city rental. Liam was tracing the floor plan of a 2-story colonial with his finger, a little smile playing on his lips. "Look at this one, Clara," he'd murmured, his voice a low hum that vibrated right through me. A breakfast nook. We could have our morning coffee right there, with the sun coming through that big bay window. I leaned my head on his shoulder, inhaling that familiar, perfect scent of him. "And we could put the big armchair you inherited from your grandfather right by the fireplace," I added, my own voice soft with contentment. We'd been together for 5 years, lived together for 3. This house wasn't just a fantasy, it was the next, solid, inevitable step. We'd saved, we'd planned, we'd spent countless nights just like this, weaving the fabric of our shared life. He was my rock, my North Star, the man I knew with absolute certainty I would grow old with. "Exactly," he said, kissing the top of my head. "It's perfect." His phone, lying face down on the floor beside him, buzzed. He glanced at it, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before flipping it back over. "Probably just my mom asking about dinner on Sunday again," he said with a casual laugh. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? Trust was the foundation our entire world was built on. "I'm going to grab a shower before we turn in," he said a few minutes later, stretching like a contented cat. He stood up, pulled me to my feet, and gave me a long, deep kiss that tasted of coffee and promises. "Don't make any major real estate decisions without me." He winked and then disappeared down the hall. I smiled, gathering the brochures into a neat pile. My heart felt so full it was practically overflowing. I was humming a little tune, imagining hanging curtains in that breakfast nook when his phone buzzed again and again. A rapid staccato of notifications. It was unusual. His mom was persistent but not a machine gun texter. Curiosity, innocent and simple, got the better of me. I figured I'd just check to see if it was an emergency, maybe something with his dad's health. I picked up the phone. It was unlocked, and the screen was lit up with the banner of the last message. It wasn't from his mom. The name on the screen was Zara. My stomach gave a weird, uncomfortable lurch. Zara was his ex, the one from before me, the one he'd sworn was a toxic mistake, a chapter of his life he was glad was over. My thumb hovered over the screen, my own reflection staring back at me from the dark glass, wide-eyed and suddenly terrified. My mind was screaming at me. "Don't do it, don't look, just put it down and pretend you saw nothing." But my body wouldn't listen. It was like watching someone else's hand move as I tapped the notification, and the message thread opened. The world didn't just stop, it shattered. It atomized into a million tiny, sharp pieces that all stabbed me at once. The screen was filled with messages, not just from tonight, but from weeks, months, pictures I couldn't bear to look at for more than a split second. But it was the last few messages, the ones that had just come through, that made the air leave my lungs in a single silent gasp. "Zara, tonight was incredible. I miss you already." "Zara, I can still taste you on my lips." "Zara, he doesn't deserve you. You know that, right?" I scrolled up with a trembling finger, a hot, sick feeling rising in my throat. I saw my own name, a message from Liam, sent just that afternoon while he was supposedly at a work lunch. "Liam, I'm with Clara now. Have to play the part. I'll call you when she's asleep. I love you. I love you." 3 words he'd said to me not an hour ago as we dreamed about our future home. 3 words that were now the most hideous lie I had ever known. The scent of sandalwood and coffee suddenly smelled like poison. The floorboards beneath me felt like they were about to give way and swallow me whole. The sound of the shower was a distant roar, the sound of my life being washed down the drain. I stood up on legs that felt like they were made of glass. I walked down the hallway, each step an eternity. I could see his silhouette through the frosted glass of the shower door. He was humming, the same tune I had been humming just minutes before. A wave of nausea so profound washed over me, I had to grip the door frame to stay upright. I waited. I stood there in the shadows of the hallway, his phone clutched in my hand, the screen glowing with his betrayal. I waited until the water shut off, until the door creaked open and he stepped out. A towel slung low on his hips, his hair dripping, a happy, oblivious smile on his face. "Hey you," he said, his smile widening as he saw me. "Decided on the Colonial with the breakfast nook yet?" I didn't say a word. I just raised my hand, holding the phone up so the screen, with his message to her declaring his love, was perfectly reflected in his eyes. I watched the smile melt off his face. I watched the color drain away, replaced by a dawning, sickening wave of pure panic. For a long moment, the only sound in the hallway was the slow, rhythmic drip of water from the shower head onto the tiled floor. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop landed like a tiny hammer blow against the fragile shell of my reality. Liam stood frozen, water beating on his shoulders, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The happy, relaxed man who had walked out of the bathroom was gone, replaced by a cornered, terrified stranger. "Clara," he whispered, his voice cracking. He took a half step forward, his hand outstretched as if to take the phone, to snatch the evidence out of the air and make it disappear. "Baby, what is that? Let me see." I didn't move. My arm felt like it was carved from stone, locked in place, holding his treachery up for him to see. "You've seen it already, Liam," I said. My voice was eerily calm, a stranger's voice coming from my own throat. It didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It was flat and dead. "You wrote it." "No, you don't understand," he stammered, his eyes darting from the phone to my face and back again. The panic was rolling off him in waves, so thick I could almost smell it, a sour note cutting through the sandalwood and steam. "It's not what it looks like. Zara, she's been going through a really hard time. I was just trying to be there for her as a friend. She takes things the wrong way, she twists things." He was talking quickly now, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate, pathetic cascade. I watched his lips move, but the sound seemed to be coming from a great distance. The buzzing in my ears was louder, the breakfast nook, the bay window, the fireplace for his grandfather's chair. Every single word we had shared that evening replayed in my mind, but now they were grotesque, twisted into a cruel parody of love. He was playing a part. This whole time, he was just playing a part. I lowered the phone, my thumb swiping up, scrolling through the filth. My own name appeared again and again, a casual reference point in the life he was living without me. "Clara has a work thing tonight. Have to go to dinner with Clara's parents. Kill me now. Clara thinks we're going house hunting this weekend, LOL." "Playing the part," I repeated, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. I looked directly into his eyes I once thought held the whole universe. Now they were just empty. "What part is that, exactly? The part where you kiss me goodbye in the morning? The part where you hold my hand while we watch movies? The part where you sit on the floor with me for hours, designing a future you have absolutely no intention of sharing with me? Clara, please," he begged, and now tears were welling in his eyes. They were real tears, I think, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a man who had been caught. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "You never wanted to get caught. I corrected him, my voice still unnervingly steady. A strange, cold clarity was settling over me. The shock was hardening into something else, something sharp and brittle. He finally broke. A sob tore from his throat and he sank to his knees on the damp bath mat, his head in his hands. He was half naked, dripping, and utterly pathetic. The great, strong man I had built my life around was a weeping child on the floor. "It just happened," he choked out. "I didn't plan it. I was weak. It meant nothing, Clara. She means nothing to me. It was just a mistake." A mistake. A single momentary lapse. That's what he was trying to sell me. But the phone in my hand told a different story. The months of messages, the pet names, the pictures, the declarations of love. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. A decision he made every single day. "How long?" I asked. The question hung in the humid air between us, heavy and final. He looked up, his face streaked with tears and snot. "What?" "How long?" I enunciated each word slowly, precisely. "How long have you been making this mistake?" He hesitated. He actually hesitated, as if he was trying to calculate the most palatable lie, the version of the truth that would do the least amount of damage. In that silence, I knew. I knew it wasn't a few weeks. I knew it wasn't a couple of months. "Liam," I warned, my voice dropping to a whisper that was more menacing than any shout. About a year," he finally stammered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "A year. 365 days. The number slammed into me, knocking the wind from my lungs. A year of lies. A year of secret phone calls. A year of him coming home to me, smelling of her. My mind reeled back, desperately trying to pinpoint the moment it all started. A year ago. What were we doing a year ago? And then it hit me. A memory so clear and so beautiful, it was now the most painful thing I had ever experienced. The weekend we went hiking in the Berkshires. The crisp autumn air, the golden leaves. The night we sat by the fire in a little rented cabin, drinking wine and mapping out our 5-year plan. The night we opened a joint savings account on my laptop, the first deposit named Our Future Home. My blood ran cold. "A year?" I said, my voice barely audible. "You mean since the Berkshires? Since the weekend we opened the house account?" He flinched as if I'd physically struck him. He slowly lifted his head and his eyes, filled with a fresh, deeper horror, met mine. He didn't have to answer. His silence was a confession that ripped through the last remaining thread of our life together. The dream wasn't just broken. It had been a lie from the very first dollar. The silence that followed his unspoken confession was a living thing. It was thick and suffocating, filling the space where all our happy memories used to be, the Berkshires. That weekend had been my favorite. I had pictures from it framed on our bedside table. Us, smiling, wrapped in a single plaid blanket, with a backdrop of fiery autumn trees. He'd told me that weekend, with his arms around me under a canopy of stars, that he had never been more certain of anything in his life than he was about us. And all the while, he was texting her. Or maybe he'd just come from her bed. My stomach churned violently. "Get dressed," I said. The 2 words were like shards of ice. My emotional response system had shut down completely, replaced by a cold, robotic efficiency. The grief and the rage were there. I could feel them, a massive tidal wave building somewhere off the coast of my consciousness. But it hadn't hit shore yet. Right now, there was just the cold. Liam scrambled to his feet, grabbing his towel and clutching it around his waist. He looked like a frightened boy, not a 30-year-old man who had just systematically dismantled our entire life. "Clara, can we please just talk about this? Don't just shut down. Please yell at me, scream at me, throw something. Just don't be like this." "I said get dressed," I repeated, turning my back on him and walking into the living room. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't look at his wet hair, his pleading eyes, his pathetic, half-naked form. Every part of him was a lie. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at the brochures for houses that would never be ours, the cozy colonial with the breakfast nook, the charming cape with the big backyard for a dog we would never get. They looked absurd now, like props from a play about a happy couple. I bent down and methodically began to gather them, my movements stiff and precise. I didn't crumple them. I didn't rip them. I stacked them into a neat pile, just as I had done before my world had ended, and walked them over to the recycling bin in the kitchen. As the glossy pages slid into the bin, I felt nothing, just a hollow, echoing void. I heard him moving around in the bedroom, the soft sounds of drawers opening and closing, the sounds of our life. The drawer that held his sweaters, right next to the one that held mine, the closet where his suits hung next to my dresses. It was all so intimately intertwined, and the thought of untangling it was physically nauseating. He emerged a few minutes later, dressed in jeans and a gray t-shirt. His hair was still damp, and he'd clearly made no effort to fix it. He looked wrecked. His eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. He stood uncertainly in the doorway between the living room and the hall, wringing his hands. "Okay," he said softly. "I'm dressed. Can we talk now? I'll tell you everything. I'll answer any question you have. I know I've messed up, Clara. I know I have. But we can fix this. I know we can. 5 years. You can't just throw away 5 years." I turned from the kitchen to face him. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms over my chest. It was a defensive posture, a way to hold myself together. "Throw away?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You think I'm the one throwing this away? You set fire to it, Liam. You poured gasoline on 5 years of my life and lit a match. Don't you dare stand there and pretend I'm the one holding the damn trash can." "That's not what I meant," he said quickly, taking a cautious step into the room. "I just mean, what we have is worth fighting for." "What do we have, Liam?" I countered, the first crack appearing in my icy composure. "Tell me, do we have trust? No. Do we have honesty? Obviously not. Do we have a future? You were building that with someone else. So tell me, what exactly is it that you think is so worth fighting for? This apartment? The furniture? The lie you've been feeding me for a solid year?" He flinched at the word lie. "She means nothing to me," he cried, his voice breaking again, the desperation raw and ugly. He took another step closer, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "It was just physical, an escape. It wasn't real. You and I, Clara, what we have, that's real. She doesn't mean a thing, I swear to you." The tidal wave inside me was getting closer. I could hear the roar. His words were so pathetic, so transparent. He was trying to minimize her, to reduce a year-long affair into a meaningless fling, as if that would somehow lessen the betrayal, as if the reason for the infidelity was the issue and not the infidelity itself. I stared at him. At this man I thought I knew better than I knew myself. I saw the way his jaw was clenched, the frantic look in his eyes. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was terrified of the consequences. He was terrified of losing the comfortable life, the real life he had with me. Zara was his fun, his escape. I was his foundation, and his foundation was crumbling. A strange, bitter smile touched my lips. It probably looked more like a snarl. I pushed myself off the counter, took a slow, deliberate step towards him, and stopped just out of his reach. He looked at me, hope flickering in his tear-filled eyes. He thought my movement was a sign of softening, an invitation to continue his pleading. He was wrong. "She means nothing to me," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. I held his gaze, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. I watched that flicker of hope in his eyes grow a little brighter, and then I extinguished it. "Good," I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning, "because you mean nothing to me now." I turned and walked to the small desk in the corner of the room where I kept my laptop and my purse. He just stood there, stunned into silence, the words hanging in the air between us like a death sentence. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys, my muscle memory taking over as my conscious mind floated somewhere above the room, watching this horrible scene unfold. I logged into our joint savings account, the Our Future Home account. The number on the screen stared back at me, a testament to years of careful saving, of skipping expensive dinners and lavish vacations, of pouring everything we had into a shared dream, a dream that was mine alone. With 3 clicks, I initiated a transfer. Every single penny. I drained the entire account, moving the sum total of our future into my own personal checking account. The confirmation screen popped up. Transaction complete. I closed the laptop with a soft final click. I picked up my purse and my keys. I could feel his eyes on me, wide with confusion and a new, dawning dread. He still hadn't moved. He was a statue of a broken man in the middle of our living room. I walked to the door, my hand closing around the cool metal of the knob. I didn't look back. I couldn't. "Clara, wait!" he finally choked out, his voice a strangled whisper. "Where are you going? What did you just do?" I paused with my hand on the doorknob, my back still to him. The question of what I had just done hung in the air, pathetic and small compared to the magnitude of what he had done. For a second, a petty, vengeful part of me wanted to tell him. I wanted to describe in excruciating detail how I had just liquidated the future he'd pretended to want with me. I wanted to see the understanding dawn on his face, to watch the panic shift from losing me to losing the tangible financial pillar of our life. But I didn't. Explaining would mean engaging. It would mean staying in that room with him for another second, breathing in the air he had contaminated with his lies. And right now, every instinct in my body was screaming at me to just get out, to escape. "I'm going out," I said, my voice flat. I pulled the door open, the familiar creak of the hinge sounding alien and final. The dim, neutral light of the apartment hallway spilled onto our floor. "Out where?" he pleaded, his voice gaining a desperate edge as he finally started moving. I heard his footsteps hurrying across the wooden floor behind me. "Clara, don't just leave. It's late. We need to talk this through. We can't just end this over a text message." "A text message?" I spun around then, my hand still gripping the doorknob, the full force of the tidal wave of my rage finally crashing ashore. "You think this is about a text message? This is about a year, Liam. A year of you looking me in the eye and lying to me. A year of you sleeping in my bed after you'd been with her. A year of you letting me plan a life with you that you were actively sabotaging. This is not about a text message. This is about every single second of the last 365 days of my life being a complete and utter fraud." My voice was rising, growing louder and shakier with every word. The dam of my composure had burst, and all the pain and fury I had been suppressing was pouring out. His face crumpled. He looked genuinely shocked, as if he was hearing the reality of his actions for the first time. "I know," he whispered, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "I know it's bad. It's unforgivable. But I can make it up to you. I'll end it with her right now. I'll delete her number. I'll block her. I'll do anything, Clara, anything. Just please don't walk out that door." He was a mess. Tears were streaming down his face again, and he looked so utterly broken that a year ago it would have physically pained me to see him like this. Now it just made me feel tired, so incredibly, bone-deep tired. "The funny thing is," I said, my voice dropping back down to that eerily calm tone, "I believe you. I believe you would end it with her. Not because you love me and not because you're sorry, but because your two perfect separate worlds just collided and you're terrified. You thought you could have your comfortable, stable life with me and your cheap, sordid thrills with her. You never intended to choose, but now you have to. And you're choosing the path of least resistance. You're choosing the life that's already built, the one with the joint bank accounts and the dinner plans with my parents." I took a step back, over the threshold and into the hallway. The linoleum of the corridor felt more solid beneath my feet than the wooden floors of the home we had made. But the thing you still don't understand, Liam, is that you don't get to choose anymore. I'm making the choice for you. I pulled the door closed, not slamming it but shutting it with a quiet, deliberate finality. The lock clicked into place. I heard him shout my name from the other side, a muffled, desperate cry, followed by the sound of his palm hitting the wood. I leaned my forehead against the cool surface of the door for a single, shuddering breath. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. I went down the 3 flights of stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silent building. I pushed open the heavy front door and stepped out into the cool night air. The city was alive around me. The distant wail of a siren, the rumble of the subway beneath the pavement, the murmur of conversations from the bar on the corner. It was all so normal, so oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just been detonated. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was him. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I walked to the corner and just stood there, watching the traffic lights cycle from green to yellow to red. I had my purse, my keys, my phone. I had the contents of our future in my checking account, but I had no home. The place I had just left wasn't my home anymore. It was just a space filled with lies and furniture. I finally looked down at my phone, a dozen missed calls from Liam, and a string of frantic texts. Liam, Clara, please come back. Liam, I'm begging you, don't do this. Liam, we can talk. We can fix it. I promise. Liam, I love you. It's only ever been you. The last message made a humorless laugh bubble up in my throat. I was about to block his number when a new notification popped up at the top of my screen. It wasn't from Liam. It was an email. The subject line made my blood run cold. It was from our landlord, Mark. Subject, urgent. Lease renewal for Apt 4B. My heart started pounding in my chest. With a shaking hand, I opened the email. It was a standard form letter, but the first sentence was all I needed to see. Dear Liam and Clara, this email is a follow-up to our conversation with Liam earlier today regarding the renewal of your lease. Earlier today. He spoke to the landlord earlier today, but he hadn't mentioned it to me. We were supposed to talk about it together this weekend. My eyes scanned down the email, my dread growing with every word, until I saw the attached document. It was a PDF, a new lease agreement. I opened it. The new lease was for a 1-year term, starting the 1st of next month. But as I scrolled down to the signature lines, my world tilted on its axis for the second time that night. There were 2 names listed under the tenant section, but one of them wasn't mine. It was Liam's name. And right next to it, clear as day, was Zara's. The street corner, once just a backdrop, seemed to press in on me. The city noise faded into a dull roar, replaced by the frantic thumping of my own heart against my ribs. I read the names on the lease again, and again. Liam, Zara. It wasn't a typo. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. A cold, calculated, meticulously orchestrated plan. He hadn't just been cheating, he'd been replacing me. The brochures for suburban houses, the talk of breakfast nooks and bay windows, it wasn't just a lie he was telling me. It was a smokescreen. A grand, elaborate distraction to keep me dreaming of a future with him, while he was busy signing the lease on a future with her ass. In our home. The home I had painted, decorated, and filled with 5 years of love and laughter. He was going to wait until the last minute, break up with me, and simply swap me out, like a burnout light bulb. Zara would move into my side of the closet, her toothbrush would go in my holder, and she would drink her coffee in the morning sun that streamed through our kitchen window. The exhaustion I'd felt earlier evaporated, incinerated by a white-hot, diamond-hard fury. The last vestiges of grief for the man I thought I loved were cauterized in that single, brutal moment of understanding. He hadn't just made a mistake. He was a monster. a quiet, smiling monster who had been methodically erasing me from my own life. I took a deep breath, the cool night air feeling sharp and clean in my lungs. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of pain just moments before, was suddenly terrifyingly clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't block Liam's number. Instead, I opened my messages and composed a new one, my fingers moving with calm precision. Me. I'm coming back. We need to talk. I sent it, and almost immediately my phone rang. It was him. I let it go to voicemail, let him stew in that little sliver of false hope for a few minutes. I needed time. I walked into the 24-hour convenience store on the corner. The fluorescent lights were harsh and unflattering, but right now, I felt like I could see everything with perfect clarity. I bought 2 of the largest, sturdiest trash bags they had. Then I walked back to the apartment building. I let myself into the quiet lobby and took the elevator up, my reflection in the polished brass doors looking back at me, a stranger with cold, determined eyes. When I reached our floor, I could hear him pacing inside the apartment. I slid my key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open and he was standing right there, his face a mess of tear tracks and relief. "Clara," he breathed, stepping forward to try and embrace me. I held up a hand and the 2 black trash bags, and he froze. "You said you'd do anything," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Here's your chance. Pack." Confusion warred with fear on his face. "Pack? What are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere." "Oh, you are," I said, stepping past him into the living room. I walked to the closet where he kept his coats and jackets and yanked it open. I unfurled one of the trash bags with a loud snap. "You are going to pack a bag, everything you need for the next few days, and then you are going to leave. You are not sleeping in this bed tonight. You are not waking up in this home tomorrow." "You can't be serious," he sputtered, following me. "Clara, this is my apartment too. My name is on the lease." I turned to face him, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. It felt alien and cruel, and I savored it. "Is it?" I asked softly. "Are you sure about that? Because I happened to get an email from Mark, our landlord, an email with a very interesting attachment, a lease renewal." The blood drained from his face. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He knew. In that instant, he knew that I knew everything. The final, most damning secret was out. "It seems there was a bit of a mix-up," I continued, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mark must have accidentally sent me the version of the lease you were planning with your replacement, the one that starts next month. But you know what that means, Liam? It means that for the next 3.5 weeks, the current lease is still in effect, the one with my name on it. And per the terms of that lease, I am well within my rights to have an unwanted occupant removed." He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had no words, no lies left to tell. "So you have 2 choices," I said, tossing the empty trash bag at his feet. "You can pack a bag, walk out that door, and go stay with Zara a few weeks early. Or I can call the police right now and have you escorted out for trespassing and creating a hostile living environment. I have the messages to prove the hostility, by the way, and I'm sure Mark would be very interested to hear about your little scheme. It might even void your new lease altogether." He looked from the bag on the floor to my face, searching for any sign of the woman he knew, the woman who would have cried and pleaded and tried to work things out. She was gone. He finally bent down, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat, and picked up the bag. I watched him. I didn't help. I just stood, arms crossed, as he stumbled through the apartment he was no longer welcome in, throwing clothes, his laptop, and a toothbrush into the black plastic sack. Every item he touched was a memory I was happily discarding. It took him less than 10 minutes. When he was done, he stood by the door, a pathetic figure holding a trash bag full of his life. "The money, Clara," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The savings account. That was half mine." "Consider it an asshole tax," I replied without missing a beat. Payment for a year of emotional distress and a spectacular breach of contract. My lawyer will be in touch about splitting the furniture and the rest of our assets. You can give her Zara's contact information, since that seems to be your new permanent address." He looked at me one last time, his eyes empty of everything but the sickening realization of the totality of his loss. He hadn't just lost me. He had lost his home, his money, and the carefully constructed lie he called his life. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He just shook his head slightly, turned, and walked out the door, pulling it shut behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the sudden, deafening silence. I stood alone in the middle of my living room. The air still smelled of him, but it was already starting to fade. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street below. A few moments later, I saw him exit the building, a lone figure dragging a black trash bag into the night. He looked up, his face illuminated by the streetlight, and for a second, our eyes met through the glass. Then he turned and disappeared around the corner. I didn't cry. I felt a profound, aching sense of loss, not for the man he was, but for the man I thought he was, for the future I had loved so dearly. But underneath the pain, there was something else, a flicker of something fierce and strong. I had survived. I took his best shot, his deepest betrayal, and I was still standing. The apartment was quiet, the ghosts were gone. It was just me now, and for the first time in a very long time, I knew with absolute certainty that I was going to be okay.